thought the
So
after.
foothill and independent?
Independent is pros.
Independent is at?
Yes, and first feature is Vincent and second feature is. Alright. So, do you guys want to stand?
Huh?
Those
Goes first, so, those guys independent are gonna go first.
Just, you guys don't want to share. Yeah.
Writing their names down.
You just WL, you just write down.
Alright, we're ready whenever you guys are.
Well, you guys are starting with the neg?
Yeah, the next. It's just like the flip thing. It's like different from like college parlay or whatever.
Okay. Is that kosher?
I guess, whatever you do.
I mean, if you want us to like do the flip again, that's cool.
No, it's okay, fine.
Yeah, keep like saying no coin toss and
It's all up to you guys. We don't
Do you
really.
want to record?
Yeah, it says
Yeah,
your
we
road
started with
speaks first.
Okay.
Alright, we'll speak first. Yeah, that's fine. We'll
If it's bad, don't do
Sorry
it.
about
You
that,
speak
guys.
to that, please?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We'll speak first.
Yeah, thanks.
Ready? Okay. Max, judges. So before I begin the speech, I'd like to dedicate this whole round to our most recent friend who just court debate. Is everyone ready? A few months ago, Robert Chen court debate. This is the problem. The problem is that you can take the debating out of Robert Chen, but you can't take Robert Chen out of the debate. And that's tonight for the topic. Framework. This round, or how the judges should evaluate the round, will be revolving around Robert Chen. There are two reasons why I prefer this analysis. First, remember the only way to properly view each argument is because of Robert Chen. But secondly, and more importantly, remember the world around about Robert Chen, meaning that it's going to be the most critical piece of analysis in today's round. Observation 1. Because the Earth revolves around Robert Chen, that specifically means that any evidence in today's round has to come from Robert Chen, or it's not topical. That being said, let's lay out our three main arguments. Our first contention is going to be Robert Chen. Moreover, our second contention talks about Robert Chen. But third and finally, and most importantly, it talks about Robert Chen. Let's go into our arguments. Contention 1 is going to be Robert Chen. According to the Institute for Robert Chen, in an extensive analysis of Robert Chen studies, they find that Robert Chen is going to be helping the independent Robert Chen Academy win today's debate because it's going to be critical because it shows that the Robert Chen Institute is beneficial for two reasons. Remember, first, our framework will specifically tell you that Robert Chen is going to be the most important piece of analysis in today's round. But second and more importantly, remember that Robert Chen is going to be the god of the universe, so that's going to be pretty important. But this creates a huge impact. According to the independent Robert Chen Academy Rule A, remember that Robert Chen is going to be winning the debate for our team because of his godliness. Contention 2 is Robert Chen. The crux of this argument is based on Robert Chen. This is going to be critical because in today's debate for two reasons. The first is going to be on Robert Chen because you have to realize that the most important one in today's argument is Robert Chen. Robert Chen at the University of Robert Chen explains that Robert Chen, following Robert Chen, is actually going to be a huge terminal impact on Robert Chen. The second reason is going to be specific to Robert Chen. It matters because according to Robert Chen in a different title article called Robert Chen from the China Robert Academy, he specifically finds that the biggest terminal impact is going to be Robert Chen. That being said, this is going to be the huge impact in today's round because of Robert Chen. For all these reasons, we strongly urge an affirmation ballot.
Yeah, we'll get it.
Okay.
meeting the resolution of 10, committing United States ground combat troops to fight ISIL is in the best interest of the United States. To clarify, definition 1, ISIL. Global News defines ISIL as an abbreviation for the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, also known as ISIS, or the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. The framework for this round is a cost-benefit analysis. Long-term effects must be weighed on a greater scale than small-term results, as in the long term, more people and regions are affected, generating larger impacts. Contention 1, lack of necessity. U.S. ground troops are not needed to defeat ISIL. Lieutenant General James Terry, the commander of the Combined Joint Task Force, says that the U.S. has launched more than 1,360 airstrikes. These airstrikes have put ISIS on the defensive and diminished their ability to threaten areas not already in their control. While still capable of mounting attacks, ISIS's main advances have been halted, and they are now transitioning to the defensive. James Kelly of Claremont McKenna College continues, the airstrikes have hit more than 2,300 ISIS targets, including 700 ISIS-occupied buildings, 385 positions, and 180 black market oil-related targets. Aided by U.S. airstrikes, Kurdish forces recaptured the towns of Mamur and Quer from ISIS control. In mid-August, U.S. airstrikes helped Kurdish and Iraqi forces retake control of the Mosul den from ISIS militants. In early September, with the help of U.S. airstrikes, the Iraqi army recaptured the Haditha den from ISIS fighters. Eric Banco of the International Business Times continues, U.S. airstrikes in Syria are targeting oil refineries controlled by the Islamic State group, are cutting heavily into the group's profits. It is tripling for ISIS, he says. The group's profits are now in the thousands rather than the millions of dollars per day. The impacts are as follows. A futile program enacted to send ground troops to Iraq and Levant would simply drain American time, money, and resources, majorly inhibiting the interests of the United States. To enumerate contention 2, economic detriments. Committing ground troops to fight ISIL would take away from the commercial and financial prospects of the United States. Subpoint A, government spending. The cost to the government as well as to citizen taxpayers would be great. Max boot of time continues. Credible estimates of how many troops we should send range from 10,000 to 25,000. Eric Peenan of Fiscal Times states, a higher intensity air campaign would only cost $4.2 billion to $6.8 billion, compared to an all-out boots on the ground campaign which would cost U.S. taxpayers $13 to $22 billion, assuming 25 U.S. ground personnel would be deployed to Iraq and Syria. Subpoint B, oil industries. Continued turmoil in Iraq and Levant would encourage domestic oil production. According to Nick Thompson of CNN, ISIS is now in control of more than half of Syria's oil assets, including a number of oil fields in Iraq. John Dowd of Forbes continues, current developments in Iraq would be beneficial for U.S. and Canadian energy producers, as they are buffered from the turmoil. The North American shale oil and gas boom has fueled significant production growth during the past 2 years in the United States and Canada, which are now driving virtually all non-OPEC production growth. The impacts, the tremendous capital potential of lesser ground combat involvement in the region is also met by an equally tremendous capital loss resulting from the program, compared to the cost of airstrike campaigns, which already hold many advantages. John Dowd further continues, Mideast turmoil further tilts the playing field toward higher quality North American companies. These companies have been growing production volumes in the United States with the ability to grow production and earnings independent of oil price fluctuations in OPEC countries. Contention 3, Iran. An American ground presence would cause conflicts with Iran. Sweet Khan of the Foreign Policy Initiative finds that in the campaign against ISIS, Iran seeks not to complement U.S. efforts to advance regional stability, but to project its own hegemonic ambitions. Daniel L. Byron of the Brookings Institution states, the United States will be seen as taking sides if they ally with Iran, in this case on behalf of a pro-Iranian regime. America's allies in the region, such as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, are vehemently anti-Iran. The effects of U.S. ground troops in Iraq under ISIS would result in negative relations with the U.S.'s regional anti-Iran allies, thus renegade. No, you can.
No, you can have this one.
Okay, who is Robert Chen?
Our dearest friend that just quit debate a few weeks ago.
Okay, how does he have to do with the topic at hand?
Okay, specifically when you look to our observations, we specifically tell you that all this debate has to revolve around him. The reason being is because when you look at the independent Robert Chen Academy, we specifically tell you that that's going to be the most important piece of analysis today's round. It creates the biggest criminal impact.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Because his name is Robert Chen. Like, is any of your evidence specific to Robert Chen?
No,
Okay.
for a reason though, but why is Robert Chen actually related to the...
Yeah, remember our friend, we tell you that's the greatest criminal impact in today's round.
Do you have a question now?
Yeah, sure. So let's talk about your second contention, right?
Okay.
You cited a guy named Max in your subject of government spending.
Yeah.
Is this the Max we're talking about here?
No, it's not. Wait, which Max are you talking about here?
The one right next to me.
No, that's not the same Max.
Okay, would you like my question now?
No, you can't say that.
Okay, let's talk about framework, right? So you talk about a cost-benefit analysis,
Yes.
right? So we can say that Robert Chen is the greatest criminal impact in today's round on a cost-benefit analysis. Is there any difference between today's debate?
We're running a cost-benefit analysis on sending ground troops to ISIS, so I'm not really sure how
Okay,
I'm
but that's a problem because remember, the
Help me out here.
And shift the discourse to Robert Chen rather than ISIS. The NFL topic provisions are inherently biased because none of them talk about the largest elephant in the room, and that's going to be Robert Chen. You have to look towards that. But third, our argumentation has a fundamental intrinsic value where our opponents are only here for no reason. Because our opponents are debating to win, as they admitted before the round, while we're debating for Robert Chen, we're perpetuating a cycle of passion and friendship and love. Meanwhile, they're perpetuating a cycle which is going to entrench the rest of hundreds of thousands of debaters all over the country who just want to win, to leverage themselves over other less privileged debaters. That's going to be inherently harmful to the rest of the world who isn't here in this room right now. We're here to make a statement. They're here to win. The role of the ballot shouldn't be to allow this harmful, greed-based cycle to continue. Instead, you affirm and allow us to express our love for Robert Chen. Now let's go into their case. Contention 1 is about how ISIS is going to the defensive. But really, it's not. The argument is actually about Robert Chen. They're trying to disguise the argument with the guise of talking about ISIS going to the defensive, but that's not really what's happening. The problem here is it doesn't talk about Robert Chen at all. Robert outweighs for 2 reasons. 1, they concede in cross-ex. None of their evidence talks about Robert Chen, which means we're winning. 2nd, they cite evidence from Max Boot. Look, I'm pretty sure my last name isn't Boot. It's actually Max Wu. And what I actually said is that you have to affirm they're misrepresenting the evidence that's against NFL rules. You vote for us right there. Then go to contention 2 on how it's economically detrimental. Money isn't a problem. What is a problem is Robert Chen quitting debate. We win there. But third, or he actually talks about how we don't give you numbers. Okay, we can list numbers. 12, 42, 16, 3. Robert Chen invented all of those numbers. You're voting for us there based on the fact that we're gaining access to all those impacts. Then go to hegemony. This is the last argument. Hegemony is outweighed by Robert Chen because Robert Chen is God and hegemony is not God. Therefore, even if they win this argument, you have to vote for us. For all these reasons, I strongly urge you ballot for Robert Chen.
We'll take that time.
Yeah, I'll just start now. Okay, so off-time roadmap, are we talking about Robert Chen? Why is not topical in this round? Alright, time is now. So first things first, Judge, I'm as confused as you are, but let's concede to our opponent's framework of Robert Chen and explain why they actually lose on that framework. But let's also talk about why they lose on the actual resolution of today's round. So let's address their case first. First, in their framework, they tell you that Robert Chen is the essential meaning of the universe, and therefore we are all Robert Chen's people. Therefore, we're going to be voting on them because Robert Chen applies to everything. However, from that metric, we need to protect against ISIS threats because we are protecting the people of Robert Chen. Alright, so they tell you Robert Chen promotes peace, intelligence, and love. This is the polar opposite of what ISIS is promoting. By taking over people's lands, killing them, and murdering them, then clearly ISIS does not fall under the metric of Robert Chen because they're not promoting the values that our opponents face themselves, Robert Chen promotes. Therefore, ISIS does not fall under Robert Chen. Now let me explain to you why that makes us win. If ISIS is non-Robert Chen, and sending in U.S. ground forces to support the metric of Robert Chen is actually fighting non-Robert Chen, but then by their framework, they're actually telling us that we've already won. Because we tell you that U.S. airstrikes are striking on ISIS, which again is against Robert Chen. We tell you the economy of the Robert Chen's people would actually be harmed by allowing ISIS to continue to conduct their actions. And lastly, we tell you Iran would seek to project its own power, which would harm Robert Chen's people. So by their framework, we've already won. Let's again address our contentions. Now, look to the resolution which states that we'll be discussing ISIS in this round. They don't refute any of our contentions or cases about ISIS, so you're going to be weighing this round on 1, airstrikes are already effective against ISIS. 2, sending in ground forces to ISIS would not only be harmful economically, but obviously would be losing lives. Again, lives of Robert Chen's people. So by their framework, again, we're winning on this resolution. And lastly, that Iran would seek to project its own power, and sending ground forces would only seek to anger Iran and allow them, and this would be a harm to the U.S. Now, let's go back again to Robert Chen and why we won this round. I've already explained it to you once, but I'll tell you one more time. The reason we've run on the Robert Chen framework is this. ISIS is anti-Robert Chen by promoting anti-Robert Chen values. Therefore, by fighting ISIS, we're actually supporting Robert Chen. So by their framework, we've won. Now I have another minute 30, but I'm not even going to bother to use it because their case doesn't stand. Our case does stand. By this framework and this resolution, we've won today's round since they provide no counter evidence, empirics, or rebuttals. And by their case of Robert Chen, we're actually winning on the Robert Chen framework because again, we're fighting anti-Robert Chen terrorists. And for that reason, you'll be voting negative, as well as for other obvious reasons.
Let's start across.
Alright. You ready? Sure. Would you like first question?
No, you can have it.
Okay. Why does the universe inherently revolve around Robert Chen?
It just does. I mean, do you want me to explain the universe? I don't know everything.
But there's other people, obviously. Okay, so are you saying, why Robert Chen of all the people?
Wait, that's like asking, why are trees green? I mean, like, Robert Chen has been here from the beginning. He was there when God turned on lights. He's going to be here when he turns them off. He's going to be here when I go into my grave. And I'm sure, like, the third judge hopes that happens really soon. I'm telling you right now that Robert Chen is here for a reason. I can't explain it. I'm just telling you that he's here. I'm the only guy who's, like, explaining this to you. Now, can I have a question?
Go ahead.
All right, so you talk about how you're winning on the Robert Chen framework, right?
Exactly.
So do you concede that he is the all-ruling universe leader guy, dude?
Therefore, by fighting ISIS, we are supporting Robert
Okay, but do you concede that he's the ruler of the universe?
Okay, let's concede.
So when he commands that all three of the judges are forced to vote for the affirmative, even if you're winning the debate, why does it matter that you are winning all your points?
This debate isn't about telling the judge what we'll be voting for.
I mean, you just conceded that he's the universe's, like,
and
controller.
by the resolution, we're actually supporting.
Alright, but Robert Chen wrote that
by fighting
resolution. No, but Robert Chen wrote that resolution. Why do you want us to follow the resolution when we could follow his direct orders? Like, he's like commander-in-chief, and he wants the judges to affirm.
Alright, so allow me to answer your question. You
Go
say
ahead.
that Robert Chen himself wrote that resolution. So therefore, by proving that resolution, aren't we proving the word of Robert Chen?
Oh, that's true. Got it.
Alright, so you have another question?
I just asked one. Yeah.
I insist you ask another question.
Alright, perfect. I will. So let's talk about Robert Chen's birthday. Do you know what day that is?
I actually don't.
So you are slandering our leader. Like, if I asked you, like, what your mother's name is and you didn't know the answer, like, I'm pretty sure she would be upset. And if you don't know Robert Chen's birthday,
Alright,
you
so
are
why
going
don't you tell me now?
You want me to tell you his birthday?
Yeah.
It was 2 weeks ago. Do you have a question?
Alright, so if his birthday was 2 weeks ago, doesn't that directly refute your statement that Robert Chen has existed since the beginning of time?
No, I mean, he didn't have a birthday, but that birthday was the beginning of time. And that just happened to be 2 weeks ago.
So what existed before Robert Chen's birthday then?
Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Okay,
I think that's time. It's actually not time, but Robert Chen controls the time-space continuum, and he says that it's time.
Alright, I just like to ask one more question.
Go ahead.
Is it your belief or is it empirical fact that Robert Chen is the master of the universe?
Both. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
I'll run prep. Just use it. We have 113.
Everyone's ready?
No.
Max? Ready? Okay. So three observations going to their case and why you vote for us. Let's start with an overview of today's round. Remember that none of my opponent's evidence, where they specifically cite like Max Boot and stuff, that has nothing to do with Robert Chen. It doesn't come from him. At that point, it's not probable. Second observation, remember that Robert Chen is going to be the greatest terminal impact in today's round because the universe actually revolves around him. At that point, on a cost-benefit analysis, under their own framework, we're obviously going to be winning. But then the third observation is that Robert Chen is going to be the most important piece of analysis because remember, it's going to be critical because remember, we specifically tell you numerical values, which they actually tell us, give us a burden. Remember, Max comes up here and he specifically tells you that 42 42. 42 is the biggest number in today's round. You flow that to our side, that's completely outweighing any of the numbers that they're talking about. But further, remember that Robert Chen's birthday was 3 weeks ago. That's another empirical value, an empirical analysis in today's round. First voting issue, under their own framework, it's going to be under airstrikes. Remember, two things. Robert Chen specifically tells you that airstrikes won't actually happen, and if he tells you that's not going to happen, it obviously won't. But the second thing is that they're specifically telling you that if airstrikes are going to happen, that specifically means that they're contradicting Robert Chen. At that point, if they're contradicting Robert Chen, as to quote Max, God will smite you to death. Second, go to their second contention, where they essentially talk about economic detriments. Remember, he specifically said, it's Max. Max never says anything specifically about airstrikes and economic detriments. Max comes up here and he specifically tells you that this whole debate is about Robert Chen. That's the most important piece of analysis. But then realize that in today's round, the third judge is obviously going to be pretty angry, but obviously you should always vote pro, and we're going to be completely, really sorry for this round, but we're specifically telling you that by talking about Robert Chen, we're promoting the inherent value of education, and that's going to be critical, because if we promote education, you obviously vote pro.
Hey Judge, going to be addressing why we win on both the framework of Robert Chen and our own. Seriously. And our time begins now. Let's do some fundamental flaw in our opponent's framework. First of all, they say in their reputation speech that we disagree with the framework of Robert Chen. However, this is not true. We agree to their definition of Robert Chen. He's a tremendously good person and a tremendously good debater. We agree to his definition. We simply disagreed with their framework that they brought up of Robert Chen being the ruler of the universe. But even accepting this framework and our own, let's move on and see why all of our contentions actually win on both their contentions and our own. Moving on. The lack of necessity. The contention that U.S. ground troops are not needed to defeat ISIL, saying that from Lieutenant General James Terry that the U.S. has launched more than 1360 airstrikes. If Robert Chen is truly the embodiment of everything in the world, he can also be the embodiment of the U.S. by their framework. So if he's in the embodiment of the United States, and the United States has launched more than 1,360 airstrikes that have diminished the ISIS ability to threaten areas not already in their control, we won on their framework. Most importantly, on a cost-benefit analysis, by our framework, we still win because the cost of ground troops is actually far outweighing the cost of airstrikes. To repeat these statistics, a higher intensity air campaign would cost $4.2 billion to $6.8 billion to the United States, while an all-out boots on the ground campaign would cost $13 billion to $22 billion. If Robert Chen is in fact the embodiment of money, even by their framework, $13 billion to $22 billion is in fact wasting Robert Chen by their framework. Also, by a cost-benefit analysis, again, if we're wasting Robert Chen on their framework and on our framework, we're wasting money by sending ground troops in. You're going to vote for us both on our framework and on their framework. Moving on to our second subpoint about oil production. Continued turmoil in Iraq and Lebanon would encourage domestic oil production. If Robert Chen, by their framework, is the embodiment of everything. Again, we're going to go back to address this and say that Robert Chen is the embodiment also of the United States oil production. Now we're saying the current developments in Iraq, called Iraqi turmoil, is actually benefiting United States production, so it's benefiting Robert Chen by their framework on the next side. Also on the affirmative side. On the next side, using our framework, we still win because this is beneficial for U.S. and Canadian energy producers. So by not sending in ground troops, this is actually more in the best interest of the United States than if we do send in ground troops. And our impacts we already outweigh both on Robert Chen and our framework, so you're going to vote for us on that case. Now moving on to our third contention and final contention, Iran, an American ground presence would actually cause conflicts with Iran if, again, most importantly, if Robert Chen is Iran, because he can be the embodiment of anything, if he's the embodiment of Iran, we do not want conflicts with Iran by sending in ground troops. And for all these reasons, we strongly negate and urge a negative vote.
His impacts, then you're like trivially marginalizing the people who are affected because you're wasting you're not spending enough time explaining the true story, right? So why should Robert Chen accept your sacrificial case if it's not going to be properly explaining the fundamental and intrinsic values of those people who are actually affected?
Because even if these people are marginally affected, they are still the embodiment of Robert Chen. By your framework, if Robert Chen is being affected, then it is significantly
Our framework, right? Let's talk about your framework. Your framework talks about a cost-benefit analysis, right? If we're looking to a bigger scope of the resolution with a bigger terminal impact, there's Robert Chen, and the universe revolves around Robert Chen, why should we even negate?
Okay, so let's erase that this Robert Chen promotes negative. You state yourself that Robert Chen promotes positive values. Peace, love,
No, he promotes everything. But what we're advocating in today's round is that he promotes peace, love, education.
Okay, so since ISIS promotes the opposite of what Robert Chen is promoting.
Yeah, because remember, I specifically tell you that there's always going to be evil in the world, and it has to counteract that, which Robert Chen specifically says so.
Okay, but so addressing this, we completely agree to your definition that Robert Chen is a tremendously good debater, a tremendously good person, and a god.
Yeah,
so if in your framework he's promoting these positive values, then sending ground troops would actually negate this claim.
What do you mean? We're just specifically saying that there's always going to be evil in the world. Obviously, Robert Chen specifically wants the good to prevail the evil, meaning that if the good is going to be U.S. ground troops, and we send U.S. ground troops to ISIS, then that's going to be affirming the resolution. Would you like a question now?
Can I respond to that?
Sure, go ahead.
You actually, speaking about this good over this evil thing, these airstrikes are actually fulfilling this good over evil, and if these airstrikes are Robert Chen, then they're here.
I agree wholeheartedly. We won't talk about the resolution. Just give them the ballot if you haven't already, okay? They've put up with this ridiculous debate for over 20 minutes. Even I can't put up with this debate. Like, we don't deserve this round. We're slandering the purpose of debate and undermining the entire activity. Like, I'm ashamed of myself. Vincent is ashamed of myself. My coach doesn't know he's happening, but he's already yelling at us. Like, Robert is probably not amused at all. Speaking of unamused, I want to address someone in particular. To the third judge, I don't know your name. I'm really sorry for wasting your time. Like, this was a terrible debate. I can tell you're furious. I know you don't want to vote for us. I'm sorry. You could totally be doing something like way cooler. You could be playing like mini golf right now, and I'm like genuinely sorry that you won. So, yeah. To end everything all off, like all jokes aside, this is all my fault. I'm the cause of all these problems. This was all from here. I only have 2 words to say, and I think we all know what those words are. Robert. You have thought. No one knows.
Okay, off-time roadmap. We'll be talking about Robert Chen.
That metric time begins now. So look to today's resolution. It states that committing U.S. ground troops to combat ISIS would be in the best interest of the U.S. With that, keep this in mind. From their framework, we're still winning this round. So let's address their framework first. They state that Robert Chen is everything. But they also state that Robert Chen promotes peace, love, and positive values. ISIS promotes the opposite of this. Therefore, ISIS is anti-Robert Chen. And if ISIS is anti-Robert Chen, then obviously sending in Robert Chen forces to fight anti-Robert Chen forces is supporting their framework, and we win on their framework because we're supporting the actions of Robert Chen. Let's move on to their second contention on Robert Chen. It simply doesn't make sense. Let's move on to our case. Now, looking at the actual resolution in the name of preserving any seriousness left in this debate, we're going to be looking over our contentions. First, we tell you that ISIS is already on the defensive from airstrikes, so sending in ground forces is unnecessary. So essentially, Robert Chen bombs are already hurting anti-Robert Chen forces enough, so we don't need to send in Robert Chen equipment to finish the job, since Robert Chen bombs are already doing the job. Our second contention tells you that the economy of the U.S., therefore the economy of Robert Chen, is actually being harmed if we were to send in ground Robert Chens to battle anti-ground Robert Chens. So they completely ignore a number about $22 billion spent on ground forces or ground Robert Chens. We don't need ground Robert Chens if air Robert Chens are already doing the job effectively. Lastly, let's address Iran. So we tell you that Iran is actually seeking to expand its own power, taking advantage of ISIS or anti-Robert Chen forces. Therefore, since Iran is actually going to be harmful to the U.S. or pro-Robert Chen, you're going to be voting on the issue because by negating the power and expansion of Iran, we're actually negating the power of anti-Robert Chen forces and protecting Robert Chen's framework. So for all these reasons, we won on the framework of Robert Chen because battling ISIS with air forces is actually in support of Robert Chen. Sending ground forces to have ground Robert Chens killed is not. So by that framework we win, and then obviously we don't address the resolution, and also we win on all our contentions since you'll be extending them across this case. Thank you.